Right. All right. Well, welcome everyone. We are here, Lauren. We made it to our fifth and final session of this book series. I have to tell everybody I'm a little, biased, but I was rereading the book last night, and I'm like, man, this book is good. And I started to text my team. I said, hey, you got homework this week. I want you to read Indicator 6. We've got an individual who's in charge of all those really fun, letters that go home when kids miss too many days of school. I said, read chapter 6 and tell me everything that comes to your mind that we're not doing or we should be doing, better or, differently. So I can't wait to dive into that a little bit today. Um, but I would love to just also be thinking about, over the last 4 weeks now, um, each week you have been taking the time, hopefully, to fill out your wheel of success. So pretty much at this point, you should have a pretty good idea of what your strategic gaps are. So if you've been filling yours out, here's an example. If you remember, we showed it to you at the very, very beginning of the outside of the wheel is your current level of awareness of perfection, right? And then wherever your team scores you as a group is what your current reality is. So you should have some idea of where you've got some strategic gaps. And as I've said before, the more you work to close those gaps, the more your vision's going to expand, the more your awareness will change. So this will be a constant growth plan for you and your team that creates really important aspects of common language, right, around culture and communication, because leadership needs three things, right? Leadership needs to be consistent. Leadership needs to be consistent. So what does that mean? It's like I can predict, right, what results I should be getting based upon my strategy. And so if you've read James Clear's book Atomic Habits, right, he said something to the fact of it's in the book. He said we don't rise to the level of our goals, right? We succeed to the level of our systems. So what you're doing here when you've done the evaluation and your team has sat down and identified your strategic gaps, and you've taken the time to create a plan to close those gaps to increase the success of that sub indicator, should give you a more predictable result. So right now you have systems. So if you're not getting the results that you desire, you have a system that's not effective. So you need to improve the strategy and the system to improve the result. So leadership, it needs consistency, predictability, and communication. Okay, those are three things that leaders got to be able to do: create consistency, create predictable results, and to be communicative, communicate what the vision is for success, what's the strategy that we're using to create that results, and what's our current reality. This is where we currently stand. And that strategy should take you from here to there. So, Lauren, you work a lot with the indicators, you work with our inner circle. Any just, thoughts around when you look at the wheel and how everybody should be kind of processing their wheel and taking the next steps to improve their school?
Yeah, one thing I wanted to point out, Tom, was you mentioned, having your team taking the assessment. And so if you have had your team take the online assessment and you're wondering how you can get a beautiful wheel like this, feel free to reach out to me. And I would love to talk to you about your wheel, and I'm happy to create a comprehensive wheel for you and your team to see because, um, you know, I know that's something that a couple participants have reached out and asked us, and we've done for them. So I just wanted to share that with you, but we'll take the average of your team score so that you know that looks like comprehensively instead of everyone having to look at their individual wheels and
Yeah.
figure that out.
And what is also great when you do it, Lauren, is that you can, we keep the wheels over time. So you can actually see the evolution of your wheel. You can see the fruits in a sense of your labor of improving. And I know when you did it for our school, the Seaside School, we used to have this significant. Someone took a giant piece of our pie in indicators 3 and 4. We just had this giant hole, and now it's closer to this norm. It's a lot more well-rounded. We're not kind of just falling on our face when we get to this point. So that was really good to see because I was very intentional in my first year of making sure everybody knew their roles and responsibilities, making sure they had a training program around those roles and responsibilities, ensuring that we had more funds that focus on professional development for the whole school as well. And those were some of the first indicators we looked at. So, and then the other part, when Lauren breaks it down, she'll also send you your raw data. So you'll be able to see which sub indicators have like the biggest agrees or disagree, because that's really where the conversation needs to happen, everybody. So, but right now you should have a good idea of maybe one or two strategic gaps might be for your school. So, I've been offering this, pretty much the whole book study, but we do have a program. It's our most popular program actually, and it's called Blueprint for Success. And what this is it's a strategic framework for each of those 10 indicators. For each one of these indicators, we have an exercise, we have a recorded lesson of you can go through that yourself. You can actually take the framework that we use based upon the lesson and start to implement that in your school. So I just wanted to take a second here and share what that looks like. Need to change my screen here. Yeah, this one. So if you're not a member of one of our programs now, you don't have access to it, but but a lot of you do, right? But if you don't, this is just a bird's eye view of the inside. So once you get this is your own private online portal. And when you have access to it here, there's a welcome to the program. You get a copy of the ebook, and we'll send you a physical copy of the book too if you don't have one. And you're able to take the online assessment. So this is the start. And then, as I was saying, for each of the 10 indicators, there is a lesson, and there are at least one or multiple exercises that you can do with your team to grow your wheel. And we've done that for each of the indicators. So there's multiple exercises, multiple professional development opportunities for you to do that. And then each month we go live and we archive all those live lessons down here in our school improvement master classes. And we try to categorize them by what indicator that can help you. So it's a supplemental piece. And then we also share our motivation and mindset lessons as well. So this is a really strong professional development library. It's perfect for you as the head of the organization, but also for each member of your team. And then we also have our principal quarterly checklist and our compliance checklist as well. So this will continue to grow each year with the more and more that we create more exercises and improve our frameworks. So it's an annual subscription that you would be able to get to right now for just $97. So $97 will get you 12 months of access to all of these programs, in addition to 12 expert monthly live sessions, either on motivation or a method. So you get an email about that, and feel free to hop in. So let's talk about let's get going with our indicator 6 here, Lauren. And this is maybe one of the most important indicators that we can really talk through, because if there's no human beings in your school except you, then you're really just kind of teaching to yourself, right? So uh, this a parent engagement is a really critical school improvement strategy. And most district schools, they don't really necessarily have to worry about this because kids are placed there. But it's one of the biggest differences of a charter school is that we thrive on parent engagement. We thrive on parent communication to other parents about how they feel about our school. So one of the questions that we ask in this chapter, if you have a copy of the book, is what's your agreed upon school-wide definition of parent engagement? And I know, Lauren, the school you taught at and were a principal at, like this was a really important strategy for you all. And your head of school, Mr. Carr, he was adamant about engagement. You're right, he went to that Harvard, program and he talked about it. And I remember, being at your school for our consortium visit, and you guys had like 90 minutes, to talk and share about your school. Half of it was about intervention, which I was like, this school's an A, and they have this amazing intervention plan. And the other half was about engagement. So I would love your just kind of, first thoughts on the importance in the chapter and any strategies around how you can engage families to be a bigger part of your school community.
Yeah, sure. This is something that we felt very strongly about. And I know a lot of schools, maybe have implemented some of these things already at their campuses, but home visits was a really big deal. And they really just believed that that parent partnership was what set us apart to be that A school. We weren't able to do all of those amazing academic teams that really accelerated our advanced learners without our parent volunteers. Most of them were the academic team coaches for us. And so I think those strong relationships wanted them to be a part of what we had going on there. And then on the opposite end of the spectrum, because our parents were so highly involved, that's why our Saturday school program was highly successful, which is what we used for our students that were needing more intensive intervention. We offered Saturday school every Saturday for them to come to, and we had very high attendance. And I think a lot of that was just because of the time and intentionality that was placed around building those relationships. My principal at the time, he did weekly coffees with parents,
Yeah. Or
a,
T.
yeah, tea. It was a true open door policy, I would say, with him. If a parent wanted to come in and talk to him, he tried to never turn them away because that relationship was just so key in the success of our school.
Yeah, and it was talked about a lot, right? I mean, if you're having weekly meetings that allow moms and dads to come talk to you, right, or some sort of activity on campus, right? It's a beehive, and
Mhm.
so I would imagine you all had that conversation around, well, what is engagement? And if someone just used the engagement term, right, was it a pretty clear definition, or was it sometimes vague? How would you describe it?
That's a good question. We didn't have like a parent contract per se.
Hmm.
But I think again, and this I think you talked about in this chapter, there was no question about how parents could get involved. We were prepared to
Hmm.
allow them to get involved. And again, I think it was just allowing them in and asking them to be a part of the academic team. Like there's just all kinds of opportunities for them to be involved in the school. Um, and so
Yeah.
I think that was important.
Yeah, and looking at our indicator result here, this particular question, the definition of what parent engagement looks like at our school is agreed upon and communicated regularly. And it's about, 50-50, right? So, half of the schools. So part of the issue, I mean, if you're pretty much on any Facebook page or you talk to a lot of leaders, right? They'll say, oh, kids aren't coming to school or the parents aren't engaged. Or one of the questions that I go back to them is like, well, do they know what your expectations are?
Mhm.
Because I remember as a consultant, there being, I know we're talking about board after this, but there being an expectation from a teacher standpoint of a board member of like what they should come to and how they should participate. And I just asked, do you think your board knows that answer? Because I'm a board member of a charter school and I don't, I would never have guessed that's your expectation of me. And it got me really thinking about, oh, do even parents know? Or like, are the expectations, is there too much of a gap between us? So I heard what you just said. It's like, everybody knew for the most part how to participate or what they could do to be a part of it. And as our school grows, like this is what I'm looking at is why I was rereading this, chapter for myself too, as a learner, as a relearner, right? And really looking at does our walk match our talk in terms of this community school. And I was like, well, we need to go back to track and volunteer hours. We need to make sure that, parents are aware of the ways to be able to communicate and the channels of communication. And we don't have, busing at our school. So in my opinion, that is the first level of engagement. The fact that a mom or dad drives a kid to school every day uh, is engagement, right? The fact that they apply to your school is engagement. Those are levels and tiers of engagement. It might be like a bottom level to some folks, right? But it is engagement. So we certainly want to create a high, standard definition of what we would love to see. But we also need to understand that not every family can engage in the same way. So having that clarity around that is really important. So this just could be just a question, a screenshot, and just ask yourself, do parents know our expectations around engagement? Do we even know? Do we have a common definition of what that is? Again, talking to teachers all the time, and it's like, oh, the parents don't care. I'm like, whoa, they care. They just not might not care at the level you think they should care, or they're not showing, or demonstrating whatever it is like you're asking them to do. Do they even know that you're judging them? So it's a very important like that you cast judgment aside around this, and really work to build a very predictable, right? As we talked about, predictable, communicative definition of what engagement is. So I heard Lauren say, she said it out loud, and I didn't tell Lauren I was going to ask that question. But I was looking to hear like, hey, how did their school do it? And their school continues to thrive. If you follow them on any social media, Triangle Math and Science Academy, they got an Apex campus, and they have like 5 or 6 campuses, and they all are really consistent. You go from campus to campus. Now the levels of engagement might not be exactly the same, but it's the same predictable opportunities for moms and dads and grandparents to get involved. So just having an understanding of what this would look like and feel like is just a really, really important part.
Hey,
Yep,
oh,
go ahead. Yeah,
sorry, I
sure,
was
go.
just going to add, it actually lines right up with this slide. I was going
Yep.
to just add on there. I think it's important to have meaningful engagement as
Mhm.
well.
Yep.
And, I feel like I've shared this story before, but when we were pursuing becoming a STEM recognized school, it really, it kind of going back to chapter one, aligning all of the things that you do with your mission and vision, it really boosted our parent engagement. Instead of just having these random family nights, we turned them into STEM nights, and we were doing STEM activities that were led by our STEM, teacher. The parent engagement just skyrocketed because all of a sudden,
Yep.
oh, I go to a STEM school and we're doing these STEM nights. It felt very
Yep.
meaningful and purposeful, and it brought them in so they could see what their kids were doing when they were doing STEM elective class. So I do think that meaningful engagement was really key as well.
Yeah, I mean, just imagine if the only time you get called or asked to participate in something is that your kid's not, behaving or not doing what they should be doing, I'm going to disengage from that, right? I mean, because now it's like, now I'm starting to almost take my kid's side. Like, I only hear from you when things are going bad. So the more you could communicate when things are going well and what we want it to look like and, should, feel like, it's always important. So on page 160 it starts, I think. We mapped out multiple strategies that you could use, consider using, and we'll talk about a few of them here. And the one that Lauren just shared, there should never be a time as a leader that you're not communicating why your school exists, the mission, the purpose, where you're going, and how you'll get there, so folks know. And I think about this, we just had a tragedy in our greater region. There was an 18-year-old female Miss Teen USA candidate, or maybe even finals. I'm not exactly sure how far she got. She was just tragically killed in a car accident. And when I was reading about her, She had all this, I mean, she had already started these nonprofits and was already helping a lot of people. And then I happened to see a message between one of our parents, who's a board member, and our principal about, hey, thank you guys for taking care of my daughter, the friend, the mentor she lost. It's been a big impact. And she said at the bottom, she said, I've always praised Seaside. I've always been a believer, but after this week, like I'll never, like there's nothing that could happen that would make me ever be against, Seaside, right? Just the way that the school kind of, and I didn't know that, this even really happened. I didn't know that there was a relationship, between the two, but she also participates in pageants as well. So I saw her last night. I said, I was thinking, we have this great foundation. What if we worked as a community and your daughter, if she wanted to lead it, help raise money for this, her mentors, nonprofit, right? Because I got a 17-year-old daughter. I got kids. Some of you listen, you got kids that are that age. I mean, every day that they drive out of that parking lot, right? Or that, driveway, like you're just hoping. And this was a really bad car accident. And so, I wanted to make sure, right, that we were living out our core values to help someone we don't know. We don't know who they are, but if that's who you aim to be as a school, right? Our first core value of our Seaside Way is support. How can we support this, community? How can we support this, family? And if we didn't do it, and we're not really living out our values, I think this is always important that you're looking for ways to do it and communicate it. And it should just be check boxes, right? It should be how, they are. So we'll kind of review these nine real quick. But they're in the book. If you've got a copy, if you don't have a copy, go to Amazon and get one. I'm telling you, it's going to give you some really great ideas and strategies. But the first is always tell a story. Tell a story. And I tell the story about Austin and Mrs. Gorski. It's kind of down, later, but here was a young man who was struggling in reading, and when I was his EC teacher, his a special ed teacher, and when he was in seventh grade, we had a half day, and the teacher gave a 9-week assessment on a half day, and it was right before spring break, and the mom calls me, and at 7 in the morning, she goes, "Do I really have to bring Austin to school today? Like it's 45 minutes one way." And he's only to go in there to take a test. And I said, I hear you. It's a lot to ask. But think about this. Your seventh grade son, who used to just fight against reading, is now asking you to take him to school on a half a day so he could take a 9-week exam. Like that's a story, right? And so she's like, you're right. I have to bring him, right? Because the stories are now being told through the success of the students. So start to collect some stories about your school, line them up to your mission and your core values. Start to really, hammer it down to your 30-second speech, right? Why we exist, who we're for, what do we do? Because you're going to be at, job fairs, you're going to be at opportunities at meetups. So there's just lots of different ways that you want to get that message out. You want to be able to do it fast because you only have a couple seconds to hold someone's attention. These other three, uh, multiple forms of media. I told the story about Rise, charter school in Southeast Raleigh, and their logo and their red shirts, and how my wife, drove by and she goes, "Boy, that bus, spot's always kind of chaotic, except for those kids in the red polos." Right. So right there was another piece. And I told that principal, I said, my wife has no idea about your school, but she knows your kids, right? And your kids are, they're swag wagons, right? They are branding you all the time. So how can you get multiple forms of media out there? Have those one-on-one conversations with those, families. When I was in charge of a school that, oh my gosh, the teachers went on strike, and I mean, we lost like 100 kids like really fast, and there was a lack of credibility. Man, every day I was in that car line. Every day I was asking people to roll their windows down. How's it going? Anything I could do for you? Hey, we got this going on. Oh, just wait till you meet the new teacher. Anything I could do, because I needed them to carry the message back to the community. I couldn't meet with every member but I could meet with those first 100 cars every day. Right? I just let them know. Um, and mobilize them, right? Find out who's got the influence in the community and see if you can't get them to go out and tell your story. Uh, I'm really excited. We've got two of our teachers here from Seaside School. One of them went to the Fresh Take Conference, which is in Davidson, North Carolina. It's in a couple of weeks, Lauren. But we got two teachers are now going to go present at that school. So I went last year and I was the main presenter, and I took a couple of people with me to talk about empowerment. And now I was like, hey, you guys should just go. You don't need me, just go. So now we got five teachers going. Two are going to actually do presentations. So that's just another way to brand your school, is to participate in networks, get them get them speaking. Maybe they can be published. You could put it your own blog on your own website and have your teachers do a blog, do a message, and just push it out there. You can build your followership in many different ways. Culture is based upon rituals, ceremonies, and stories, right? So making memories is a huge part to share your mission. Be a travel guide, not an agent, right? I love when John Maxwell talks about this, but yeah, just really, really give them a map, like really travel alongside them and show them what it's going to look like. And maybe you do that through the stories of your graduates and your alumni, but you start to like paint the picture of the future of all those students. If you're a K-8 school, K-12 school, you want those families to be with you all the way, and then you want them to give back after they leave. All right. So what are some ways that you can create a vision GPS for them so they really see it all happening? And then maybe the most important is you got to model the way. The people, they see what they hear, right? So you want to make sure that everything you do and say is how you act. If your walk doesn't match your talk, then you're going to lose credibility fast. And I encourage anybody who's on here live with us, or if you're watching the recording, tell us what you do. Drop an idea in here. Lauren, maybe there was something that's not on this list that you guys did at, Triangle, or maybe your kid's current school does, something really well.
I would say the one that kind of came to mind reflecting about, my past experience is definitely that identifying and mobilizing your influencers. And I think that's also something that John Maxwell talks about in his 21 Laws of Leadership. But having that awareness in the room or in your, parent body of who's has the greatest influence is really important. And once you identify those key people, it really helps, spread the vision of what you're trying to do.
Yeah, and it's a critical point because, influence is leadership. I mean, leadership is influence. So if you have, like, for example, I had to go into those schools, nobody knew who I was. I didn't have a relationship or rapport. I had to, figure out, the PTO, who was the leader of the teachers, who was the leader of the non, PTO parents. And you just had to meet them, and you had to sit there and you had to listen to what they had to say, right? You had to instantly build rapport, right? And a trust. And you do that through my favorite John Maxwell quote, which is in the book. It's the very first written, well, it's after the dedication. And John signed it in my version, trying to be careful with it because my book's falling apart now, Lauren. He says, when you make a commitment, you build hope, but when you keep a commitment, you build trust. And that's really what parent engagement is about. Are we doing what we said we would do? So this is for any charter school of any age, but mostly the ones in years like 0 through 3. Under promise, over deliver. Do not over promise and under deliver because you'll lose them. Okay. Give them very clear timelines of when things are going to be done and when they can expect them to be done. And hopefully, right, your timeline is wrong in the right way. Like, right, say, oh, it's going to take 3 years. Maybe it only takes you 2. And you do those things and you start doing what you say you would do, then you're going to get those influencers on your side, and then you can utilize them to mobilize others because they have followers.
Mhm.
So it's very, very important to be, thinking about that um, as well. So, some common crucial and critical problems occur when, these things we talked about. There's really no clarity in what engagement, looks like, and where there's inconsistent communication around what the school is or doing. And we see this when there's a lot of turnover at the top. There's no it's a STEM school, but there's nothing STEM about it, right? Or it's a Montessori school, but there's not a lot of, Montessori talk, not a lot of Montessori language. Or the example I gave in the book was my kids' school. That it was, we went there because it was very, project oriented. It was very experiential learning. But when I went to my first parent meeting, the whole meeting was about my kids' like diagnostics and their academic technical stuff. I'm like, well, that's great. Like I know that they're doing well academically. Tell me about the other stuff, the character, the communication, the leadership. Like how are they, how are they doing? So if you say that's what your school is, then make sure that you're communicating data points around that. Because that, if you don't do that, that, crucial problem turns into a critical problem where there's low involvement, low, buy-in, low of, parents, and they'll look elsewhere. They'll look elsewhere. And that's, you can't have that as a school if you're losing students. So um, was there one more thing we want to talk about? I've got on my list page 169. So I want to open my book here to see what notes I was telling myself to make sure I shared with you guys about parent engagement here. Oh, so this was yeah, these were the ways to communicate your mission and mission values. So, Lauren already kind of talked about this, create a committee, create parent recognition programs. And one of the ideas that we shared in the book was about Union Academy and how they used to they almost used to like I won't use the bullying term, but they created FOMO, right? So if you got your 50 hours of volunteering, you got a shirt and you got like a magnet for your car. And if you didn't have your magnet on your car or your t-shirt, like during certain events, people are like, hey, where's your shirt? Have you volunteered enough? Like, where's your time? So find ways to recognize them. This is something we're really working hard at. We thought we had a good idea, but we just haven't carried it through. So that's a really important part. Um, Make sure that your parent-teacher conference, lines up, that your teachers are actually trained how to do a parent-teacher conference. You may think that that's like something they should know how to do. They don't. They barely know how to write an email, let alone lead a conference about someone's baby, especially if they've never had a child. So I think it's important, right, that how you do anything is, right, is how you do everything. So taking the time to really walk through what does a parent teacher conference look like, feel like this is whether it's one that's, scheduled because you do it quarterly, or just maybe a conversation home because a student maybe isn't meeting the needs, or it's not, meeting the expectations, or the grades are low, or they're missing work. Like every teacher needs to know how to talk to another adult without being judgmental, right? With just kind of, stating the facts and making sure that they're demonstrating, empathy. Because, you know, I always start every meeting with the same line. Thank you for taking the time to come. We're all here because we love your kid. We're all here for the same reason. So let's start there, you know. Because if you let emotion kind of get involved, like in the way of the kid's success on either side, it usually doesn't lead to a very, very good meeting. So you want to create alignment. You want to take the time to get feedback from families. Lauren does a great job. We have, climate surveys that are really great tools to use. And I really think that one of the most important questions is asking parents why they chose you and then why they stay. Make sure they're lined up and they're improving and they line up to your mission, values. Um, Make sure you're communicating and don't leave it up to the parent to just take the next step, right? You as the school, like there's a rule here about relationships. The person with the higher level of responsibility in the relationship should like lead the relationship. So you're making sure at the back end of your parent-teacher conferences or any communications, what's going to be the next step? I'm going to do this, and then you follow through and you do that for that, a parent. There's so many times when like, as a principal, I hear well, they never reached back out to me, or they never called, or they never did it, right? And every time those things happen, you lose trust. All right. Think of, credibility as change in your pocket. Maybe you got $1 in coins. Every time that you say you'll do something and you don't, you're going to lose a coin, right? And eventually, if you don't start building credibility and adding coins back in your pocket, you'll just have lint and that's it, right? So it's very, very important to make sure that they follow through and be very conscious of the words that you use around your teachers and be very conscious of the words that you allow them to use, right? And I'll just write this down. They don't care. They do care. They do care. Your care is just different right now. You need to get on the same page around what care is. If you start there, that'll be huge. And I think this last one is a critical part or two. The parent and partner leadership is on page 173. But think about this. If you have a real heavy emphasis on volunteering, do one of two things. Maybe find a parent or someone you could pay um, a good sum of money, 10, 15, $20,000 a year to manage all your volunteers. If you've got 1,000 families, and if they all did 20 hours of volunteer work, that's 20,000 hours of potential labor and support towards your school community. I'll pay someone $20,000 to get me 20,000 hours, right? So just be really thinking about how can we best leverage our parent and partner leadership programs, and how can we leverage them to help us recruit for the future? We want them to help us recruit kids. We want them to help us recruit, teachers. They will be a very, very positive recruiting tool for you if they're properly engaged and if they're properly equipped and they know what to share. So it's a big, healthy chapter, everybody. It's a big, healthy chapter. It's 30 pages almost. There's a lot of great strategies. Start from where you are, right? Don't try to do it all. Just pick one idea and just, we got 90 days almost until the end of the school year. Like, what's one thing you could start to do right now to get you in a better spot 30 days from now, 60 days from now, 90 days from now, whatever it is, write that action step down. Oh, and there was one more survey too. And we did a student voice survey and I thought it was really helpful we have grades 5 through 12. And we did the survey for grades 5 through 10 because our other two grades are in college. But it was really good feedback about what kids felt safe about, what they don't feel safe about, what types of classes that they would like us to see. Just really great, feedback. And we broke down the data, and every grade level took some time to write down an action step, just one thing that they could do to improve their students' experience is what we were making sure. So student experience. I'll pause there, Lauren. Anything you want to add to this chapter 6 before we go to
Yeah, I
guidance?
was just thinking, we've talked a lot about making sure we communicate our expectations to our parents, but just kind of educating all stakeholders on that, I think is really important, especially the staff. Kind of going back to my prior example of my former principal wanting and allowing parents to come in, and if they were disgruntled, he was always inviting them in to come and have tea with him. And I think sometimes, our front office staff, they try to protect us. And so, at the time, she was kind of trying to shield him from these types of parents. And so we had to identify that there was a communication gap in what our parent, what we wanted to allow parents to come in and do. So I think just, with our teachers communicating that expectation, I think every parent can probably say they've experienced from year to year, teachers that do want them in their classroom versus teachers that don't want them in the classroom, how much control teachers are allowed to or wanting to give up. So making sure that all the teachers are on the same page and what the school's expectations are around parent volunteers, I think is also really important.
Yeah, because when you think about it too, Lauren, probably a good percentage of your teachers are parents
Mhm.
as well, right? So when you think about my stakeholder level, my first real important stakeholder are my employees. Do they know, right? Are they clear? Do they have, are they equipped? to do it. So then they can, right? So just more vision carriers and vision casters all the way down. It's cascading communication. And when you got teachers at your school that don't bring their, child to your school, it's something to think about. Something to think about. And a question, asked. It's not that they have to, right? But how come they're not, right? What is it that they don't, trust? And we've had a couple schools where we asked that in the climate survey. And boy, the data points were really important. Qualitative data of miscommunication between board and leadership down the staff. Oh, it was incredible. And I don't think they really took the time to try to rewrite that and realign that. But it was really eye-opening for me to hear why they wouldn't bring their kid to this school. They thought it was a school for at-risk kids only, and closing the gap. And it was a school that had low performance for years. But the reason was because they cut all of their music, art, and any elective program so they could just do academics all day long because their kids needed it. But they never communicated why they did it. And it was really a budget issue. It wasn't about the academics. They just couldn't afford all those extra teachers. But as a result, it actually really cut their legs out because by not offering those electives, it just made the school look like almost like an alternative school. And that wasn't the board's goal at all. They're like, no, we don't want that. It's like, well, that's what your staff thinks. So if your staff thinks that, what do your parents think? Right? I mean, if you're out there applying for this school and a parent says, oh no, that's not for your kid, that's for alternative kids. I'm not applying. I'm not applying. So,
Yeah.
right.
And my
Great
last
work there.
kind of,
Yeah, go. Yeah.
I would say my
Yeah.
last kind of thought around it was thinking outside the box about what parent engagement can really mean and look like. I would consider, even parent teacher conferences engagement, and that was just the last example that kind of popped in my head that we had to have realignment in our teachers and making sure they understood our expectations around parent teacher conferences.
Yeah.
I think there was this misconception that they only needed to be meeting with the, at-risk students who are not doing well.
Yeah.
And, we were like, no, we have a whole day dedicated to parent teacher conferences because we think it's important for them to be coming into the school, no matter how successful your child is doing academically. There's always something that you can share that is, a growth opportunity, even if they are a high achiever, and highlighting all the wonderful things they are doing. And it's another touch point to build that relationship with the
Yeah.
parents and the teachers.
Yeah. Yeah. And also with the tutoring too. I know you guys had interventions in Saturday school for all kids, not just kids that had a C. There
Right.
was kids that had an A.
Yep.
And we have that as well. And I think that's just another way to, communicating how the community um, feels academics is important, right? That they want their kids to be, have all those gaps closed. And we as a school don't say, oh, you have a B, you don't need to come to tutoring, or you have an A. Like, no, let's do it. Let's do it.
Mhm.
David asked, what are some good practices for the board to communicate intent to full school community to avoid a disconnect? Well, it's a good question, David. I mean, I think the board, right? The board is the top of the organizational chain. So they too should be doing all those things. They should be modeling the way. They should be communicating and have, clarity in, the vision. They should be making sure that they redirect communication where it needs to go, but in a nice, caring but candor way. It's like, oh, I appreciate you bringing me that question. Have you talked to, the head of school? So making sure the communication channels are clear and making sure everybody is clear on mission, vision, goals. You could certainly have a section of your newsletter that is all about the board. We have a board web page. I wouldn't say it's great, right? But there's a headshot of 90% of the board members there with a short, bio. It's not something I've done probably as much as I should, but I try to always send out board, meeting minutes to the entire community or big decisions that we've made. We just had 29 board members apply for 3 openings. It's pretty significant. And the people that didn't get on the board, like, I mean, they're very, very talented. So like we worked hard this year to show like what the board does, what the expectations are. And then I've talked to them a lot about, hey, Here's how I need you communicating in the public. I can't have you, relaying gossip, right? Or even accepting gossip. Like if you hear it in your car and carpool, like I kind of need you to shut it down and make sure that it gets redirected, the right way or at a party. Because you shouldn't be talking about school stuff at a party only, but we all know what happens at parties. So I think those would be a few, but I wouldn't say, and then again, it goes back to, and we're going to roll, right into it here with the governance, section um, is that relationship building piece. The stronger your relationship is with your head of school and your leadership team, the easier it will be to answer that, question, David. Right. So when it comes to effective governance, this is the question that starts the chapter. When it comes to effective governance practices, it has very little to do with the challenges around governance and more about the behavior of the people on the board. So just like, the parent engagement needs expectations, the board level engagement also needs, clarity and expectation around, what that looks like, what that, feels like, and making sure that everybody's aware of the two E's, right? Ensuring versus executing. Ensuring is board responsibility, executing is management responsibility. Or in an easier term, how well is the academic plans meeting the needs of our kids, right? Versus how will. This is how we will close close academic gaps. So I think the more that the board streamlines their language as well and their communication as well to be asking and verifying, rather than trying to do it, right? Or to influence it, right, in an opposite, direction of what everybody else has agreed to. The behavior of the board that matters, and I hear it from my staff all the time, board members kid. Like, what, person is a parent, first of all, and they haven't been a board member for 6 years. Right. So, I mean, it's like, it's not a board member's kid, it's Mike, right? I mean, let's get clear, but that perception is reality. So I do think that, board members, just like heads of schools, right, high leadership positions, we have to make sure that at all times we are modeling the way and modeling the behavior we desire to see. And if we're not doing that, someone needs to identify whether it's on purpose or not. So the hard part is, how do you create accountability? If it's the head of school, if I have to talk to a board member about their, behavior, like that's tough because that's my boss in a sense, right? Or their one vote of however many. But it has to happen. So when I talk to them about those things, I do as best as I can to separate the parent side from the board side. And even though that's, difficult, I just say, hey, look, here's if you have that concern, like here's the way to get that concern talked about, not in a board meeting. Like that's not the place. Because it gets me and my management team kind of on like a defensive. So I think that's important, right? So just having those conversations, and you could do that during your annual retreat or your orientation. It's kind of ongoing about how you develop and equip your members of the board to make sure that they're clear on what engagement looks like at a board perspective. So that means I show up for meetings, I show up prepared for meetings, I ask questions, I work within the guardrails of the communication and the open meetings laws. I make sure that I'm on a committee or two to that lines up to my talent. Shouldn't be not more than one committee, but if I'm on two, that just means that maybe we just don't have enough board members and we need to find more, right? So getting really clear with expectations, and then like, what's our role? What does it look like? So the board's primary role is to establish the student outcomes. Doesn't mean that you like teach kids. It doesn't mean that you evaluate kids, but you work specifically with the management, say, here's what we want students to achieve. Right? That's the end result. So then I can ask how well, right? How well is the management's plans creating the results we desire to see? It's their role to establish a healthy relationship between a board and head of school. So every month there should be, just this constant working together and getting clarity. When I was a board chair, I would always ask at the end of the board meeting, hey, is there anything that the executive director brought to us that we don't really need to vote on or we trust them on. And we would probably name some things. Then I'd say, hey, is there anything that maybe we didn't get the information that we would like to, so we could have voted on it, right? We're just creating that guardrail each month, and just making sure that we're not talking, behind the leader's back, but we're creating a healthy relationship, based upon trust.
Hey, Tom, can I
Mhm.
add in
Sure.
real quick?
Yeah.
Just kind of reflecting here on David's question about the board communication. And one thing that I've noticed just over the years, um, the low hanging fruit communication is really your board meeting agenda and minutes. And you'll be shocked how many people aren't posting them like they should. If you listen to any of the schools that are going up for charter renewal, um, that's something that they're looking at. And lots of schools, you know how it is at a charter school. You're wearing so many different hats, and you're like, I thought so and so was uploading the minutes and they're not there now, and it's been months. And so I would say making sure that on your website it's easy to find who's on the board, and where are your meeting minutes and your agenda, and making sure they look professional. I've seen a lot of board meeting minutes, and the level of detail and clarity is very wide. But that is a way for your stakeholders to see what's going on and get updates from the board. So that was just one thing that kind of popped in my mind in terms of communicating.
Yeah. Yeah. Agree. And you're right. And that goes back to the transparency part. And that, it just goes back to like the more I put out there, the less I have to, the less I create, questions in the community.
Yeah. And I
Right.
think it can escalate very quickly. Something as small as like your board meeting minutes maybe not being updated. You have a parent though that now you're in a crisis thing with a parent. They're going to start hunting like, well, who can I get in contact with? And now they're looking at the board like, oh, there's not even information on my website and I can't even find board meeting minutes. It's like it just can escalate quickly. I've seen over the years. So that was just one thing that popped into my brain.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's good. So if you don't have a copy of this, roles of the board, you can, I think one was emailed to you if you got every day the leadership challenge. But if you've uploaded the, bonuses that we've sent, or if you're like, Tom, can't find any of that, you could just email us and we will send it to you. But on the one side, it has the shared relationship, model that you can use, and what's the board's role versus versus the head of school's role or the management team's role. So the board's really focused on making decisions on mission, vision, board structure, school leader supervision, policy, and branding. That's pretty much it. And branding's pretty much the only operational stuff that a board will really get involved in, like on like a decision basis. That's all by themselves, right? And when I say branding, right, branding is what you see. It's your logo, it's your colors. Now, the principal gives advice, but the board makes a decision, then they decide by vote. Now, at the bottom of our chart, you get the management decisions, right? They make decisions on staffing, evaluation, programming, systems, procedures, stakeholder communication, school culture, and marketing. Remember, marketing is the relationship between the organization and its community, okay? Big difference between branding and marketing. They're two different things. So the board gives advice and the management makes decisions. Now, this should line right up to the school leader's evaluation. I mean, this is what they're being evaluated on, is their ability to make good decisions and execute their plans to achieve the goals and the results of the board and the organization. And then in the middle here, there's a lot of partnership, decisions. And this is handled through committee. Could be your academic committee, your governance committee, your finance committee, development. I think in the book, I think I mentioned five in the book. And I've come with lots of schools. They have a marketing committee. No, they have a personnel committee. No, like it's not their role. It's not their role to interview incoming teachers. It's not. The only employee they have is the head of school. That's it. They govern the employment entity, which is the nonprofit, but they really only supervise and hire and fire one person, and that's the head of school. The rest of it, now they certainly vote on hires, and they should know what's the process that the leader took to hire people. It doesn't mean they go through like step by step of every process. They say, hey, here's our step by step, here's our hiring framework, right? Here's what we do. We hire, we do three core interviews. We do a call. We do an hourly, deep dive, and then they come to campus where they meet with, five other teachers and students, and they do a mock lesson. I mean, whatever it is, the board should have an understanding at a high level. What are the steps that the leader took to bring this recommendation to you? And obviously, a big part of that is do they line up to our school's budget? And it should be same thing for termination. If I'm bringing someone for either termination or non-renewal, the board should have a good understanding of what's the procedures, right, that were created from the policy that the board approves. So board approves policy, creates policy so the management team knows how to operate. We talked about that last week in our previous session, right? But I think it's an indicator. Eight and nine is all about systems and procedures off of the approved policy. This is just a great chart. You can print one, give one to every one of your board members, so you have clarity. And then you could say, hey, look, if you're like in a deep meeting, it's taking 2 hours, and you're like, but is this a how well question or a how will question? I feel like that bald guy said, like, we shouldn't be involved in we need to hide. We just need to tell the head of school what we want done and have them bring us back the information, right? Because otherwise, board, meetings go for hours and hours. And this is the perfect entrance way to this chart. I love this chart. I believe I learned this from Marcy Cornell Feist. I think, she was, she's the board on track leader and guru. But I just love talking to boards about, hey, the age of your school should determine the percentage of time you spend talking about the current versus the future. Now, the leader's job is to always be able to pinpoint the current reality, like where are we? So that's just, and that can be done through the monthly board report. Here's our updates on all of our goals. But I don't need to read through the board report, right? I gave it to you days ago, hopefully, 5 to 7 days ago. So do you have any questions on it? Because the more important part of this board meeting should be really, focused on the future. So if your school is 5 years or older in operation, 90% of your board meetings should be about the future. That could be about, land that you're looking to buy or expansion or, strategic partnerships, or just, bigger challenges that you're seeing down the road. So that's where things are not discussed at a deep level at the board meeting. They're discussed at a deep level in a committee meeting, and the committees will bring reports to the board and information to the board, either as an FYI, as maybe a discussion item, not always too much, or vote. It's the only purpose. So your board meeting should be focused on action and intentional action based upon the goals and the vision set forth. So if you don't have written down goals and you don't have a clear vision, I'm not sure what you're taking action on. Like, how do you know it's the right decision? So as the board matures, so does the agenda. So this is a really just good chart to a screenshot, or if you have the book, it's in it. I don't know what page off the top of my head. Lauren will probably know. Oh, I just actually hit it. Uh, let's see what it is, so I can tell everybody who's listening on the replay. Page 295, developing the board agenda section. And there's a great in the book, I talk about, the process of creating a board agenda that's focused on being responsive and not reactive. It's really important. Your board meeting should not have more than two really important things on it. The rest of it should just be, you could do a consent agenda to just approve it all. But one or two items, because it's the Pareto principle. 80% of your results, right, come from 20% of your actions. So what are those one or two critical actions that should take place at your board meeting? And people say, oh, we got all these things to approve. Okay, put them on the consent agenda. If the committee's done the work and make a recommendation, and you've put them in a place to be successful, then approve their recommendation. Approve their recommendation.
Hey, Tom, can we pause there for 1 second? I
Yeah.
just want to make sure, David, did Tom answer your question fully, or do you want to unmute yourself? You're good? Okay.
Let's see Dave's questions. Personnel committees. Yeah. So yeah. So the board, yes, they should vote to hire anybody, and they should. I do think they should vote to renew every contract too. I think that's really good practice. So then it ensures that your head of school isn't working in a silo because that's a dangerous spot. And remember, your job as a board is to mitigate risk. So what I would recommend is that, hey, let's say I got 50 employees, and maybe I'm going to recommend 48 for renewal. I might put all 48 names on the bottom of my board report and just say it's here. Now, some board member might say, is there anybody who's currently working who's not on this list? And I'll say, yeah, there's two. And if you want to talk about it, we need to go into closed session. But I should have already informed them. Like it shouldn't be a surprise that there's multiple people not being renewed because I should have already started to have that conversation 3 months ago. Hey, I got two employees and they're really struggling. And here's what we've put in play to help them, but they're either in the wrong position or they're just not good for us. So I'm going to try to find another job for them in our school. But if it's not a good fit, then I'm gonna let them know that I'm not going to renew them. And so yeah, so that happens, and the board just needs to be aware of it. It's not a fire, right? It's a non-renewal, but the board should still vote because then that puts a concrete tangible piece of evidence on paper that there was something that actually made us decision, and it wasn't just me hiring and firing who I want. And I always say, if you're a new leader of a charter school, you pretty much only have 2 years. So you got, the first year that you're a, leader, that was the last guy's, mistake, right? Year two, you're like, yeah, I've really tried, but yeah, this isn't, something we had, year three, you can't be blaming old, leadership. So if you're still having year after year high levels of attrition for students or turnover with your staff, like that's a leadership problem. And so your leader needs training and needs to be equipped on how to one, recruit and hire, orient, and equip um, all of their staff members. So Lauren put this in here because of our five or six, well, there's seven sub indicators, I think, for this one, but this 10E was the lowest. So structures in place to recruit and develop board members with diverse skill sets, which if you're part of Leadership Challenge this morning, that's what I sent to you is our board recruitment plan. It's a really great tool, but you want to know, if I've got clarity in my vision and my goals, as a school 3 years from now, right? If I do a board retreat with you, the first thing on the agenda is going to be what will school look like, feel like, and people experience on February 21st, 2028. We just look 3 years because that's about all you can really look. 90 days is really the max, but if we can start to just think, 3 years ahead. So by the end of that board retreat, we'll have a good map of, okay, here's where we want to be. Now that helps the governance committee if they're the ones responsible for recruiting and recommending new board members. It gives them clarity. Okay, what are the skill sets that we need to make that happen? So if we're going to expanding, we need someone who has experience in either purchasing commercial property, right? Development of property. Probably need someone who has experience in capital development, right? So like, okay, these are the people we're starting to recruit, right? Or for so whatever direction you're going, you want to recruit those talents, and you always want to have talents around governance, academics, finances for sure. And I think you definitely need people with development. But there's a list. But what our board recruitment plan does, it just gives you a map of where you currently are and what are the skill sets that you have, and then what are the skill sets that will be rolling off of the board each year, right? So that's where we are right now. So back in December, we started that process. We're like, hey, who are the 5 members rolling off? What are the skill sets that you will be missing? Okay, those two are critical. We have to replace those two. And then we're looking for these other two like skill sets. And then we had the 29 people, 28 or 29, and then they went through a vetting process. They went through an interview process, and we used a rubric to come up with. We're supposed to only bring in 3, but we ended up bringing in 4 because we had some space. So develop a recruitment process. Very, very important. Page 301 of the book outlines what this will look like, and then make sure that there's succession planning. So at that same board retreat, when I ask, what will 3 years from now look like? I also ask, who's in here for the first retreat or the first meeting? And a handful of people raise their hands. Great. Right now, you need to be thinking about who's going to replace you, right? What are the skill sets that I bring to this board, whether it's finance, governance, the development, and then who in my inner circle could replace me, right? Or who can I train? Who can I prepare to take my spot 3 years from now or 4 years from now? It's very important that you have a succession plan for your officers and you have a succession plan for your school leadership team. Critical importance because there is no success without succession. And we've got some, lessons on it. I didn't dive too much in a book about it, but if you're looking for what are just some good transitional kind of practices, happy to share with you. Go ahead and email us. So no need to reinvent the wheel. We've already got a board recruitment plan for you. So it was emailed to you this morning if you're part of Leadership Challenge. If you're not, you can email me or go to 10indicators.com where you bought the book and you'll be able to download all of the resources for free. So Lauren, can you take us through our common, crucial, and critical problems and then we'll close this up.
Sure. So just taking that kind of data point, knowing that the lowest sub indicator was that one around board recruitment. So the common problem that we see is there's lack of a strategic recruitment plan. Schools will rely on word of mouth, or it's a very informal process, which will lead to gaps, in that diversity that we were just talking about. And so the crucial problem becomes with, when that kind of process continues to happen, the schools will often struggle to build a pipeline for future board members, leading to the last minute and reactionary recruitment, which is, often leads to rush decisions being made, and members not fully understanding, what is their role and responsibility. And then the critical problem here is the lack of the diversity and the skill set that's on the board.
Yeah.
There's a lot of problems that can just continue to go on.
Yeah, as I said,
Uh,
so like many times we'll be like, hey, we just need a board member because they're out of compliance with their bylaws or they're short. And I'm like, don't just bring anybody on. Like just work through it in a short term. Because the last thing you want to do is bring someone on that doesn't have the same values, it doesn't have the same beliefs and alignment. And eventually that board member you just brought on is going to be a board leader. And if your board's tiny, like 5 members, it's three's a quorum. And so that was the one thing I said to my board last night. They were asking me, like, because it's our goal to shrink our board, but now it went back to being bigger. And I said, well, the one benefit that it's bigger, that, it's less of a quorum to kick me out of this place, right? But I mean, it is hard. It's hard to manage 13 or 15 personalities. It's hard for the board chair to wrangle that and to put, people in places where they can be successful. So there's no right or wrong answer, but you certainly want a strong balance. But if you're not being intentional, I mean, in any recruitment, like all year long, you should be recruiting. And I think Lauren added that here on this chart too, Lauren, right? I think you've got some, solutions, go to recruitment events, I always say go to one Chamber of Commerce event a year at, minimum and represent the charter school versus your own business and just say, hey, I'm a board member at, Integrity Academy, and here's our mission, here's our vision, here's who we serve. We're always looking for, students. We're always looking for strategic partners and great employees, but we also need board members, and it's a really heavy responsibility, but we need talented people like you, and I'll be standing over here. I mean, whatever it is, if every board member did that, or if every board member just recruited one potential candidate, you may have 7 to 10 a year, and that's a great, batch to be choosing from. But if you're rolling off 3, 4, 5, board members a year and only getting a couple applicants, it's this common to a critical, problem, a path is in your future.
yeah. I'll just add, Tom, think about all the recruitment efforts that we do for our staff and students.
Yeah.
And it's like all of a sudden it's time to recruit board members. And, it's one person trying to find somebody that knows somebody. And it's just not the same level of effort when it's a really critical position at the school.
Yeah, it is. And it goes, I mean, if you think about it, Every failed charter school can go back to the actions or the non-actions of the board. Every board that I had to, work or school I had to work with at a very deep level had dysfunction at the board level. It wasn't a great board, right? That somehow hired a not very strong leader. It was a dysfunctional board that had a leader who may not have been prepared, and that just didn't. That's just not a strong combination. So. Well, look, congratulations. Make sure you write down your action step on your sub indicator 10, whatever it may be, and we're here to support you. We sent you the board recruitment plan. I would download that roles and responsibilities. I would make sure everybody has a copy on your board. I would make sure you spend 15 minutes talking about it at the next board meeting. And we've got some, monthly board strengthening exercises in the book that you could just adopt and do. I mean, this book it's a blueprint for your success. It's a professional development program in itself for every aspect of your school, every aspect of leadership in your school, and that's whether it's a parent leader, a student leader, a staff leader, a school leader, or a board leader. You will gain some benefit from reading this book, and you'll gain more benefit if you read it as a group and you talk about it and you follow the processes here. And you do things in a certain way. And when you do things in a certain way, you get the results that you want. So you should have your whole wheel of success should be completed now. You should have a score for each of the 10 indicators. You should be able to tell whether or not your wheel's going to roll in a balanced, smooth way, or is it going to be a bumpy ride? And wherever it's a bumpy ride, so this is where I would set your priorities. And if you're sitting around a table with your team, I would look at these two or three indicators that might be lower than the rest and have a conversation. You don't have to have a conversation about all the indicators in one meeting. You could just pick one at a time. Say, hey, this week, let's just talk about indicator three. Let's look at how we each scored these sub indicators of indicator three. Like, what would that look like? What changes would we need to make to get that result, right? What do we believe our current barrier is? All right. How do we overcome that barrier? One of the challenges for you all who are working through this book is that you're going to have to overcome some self-limiting be, beliefs. You're going to have to take those your current conditions and circumstances and just put them to the side. Okay. You can't blame conditions and circumstances if there's highly successful charter schools around you. Because guess what? They pretty much have the same conditions and circumstances that you do. They're just doing it differently, and they're doing it in a certain way, and they're getting better results. So go study them. Go study them, right? Don't be upset with them. Don't say that they're taking all your kids. Just go study them and really see, like, what are the practices they have in play that are working that would work for you. Don't just take everything they do. Say, what are they doing that would work for us? What would line up to our core values, right? And as Lauren shared last week, make a bigger piece of pie. Find other ways. We're working with a school now, and they threw out a giant outside the box idea. Maybe we build a virtual academy, right? Because they've been talking about for 6 or 7 years about expansion, and they've never pulled the trigger. But then they talked about virtual academy. It's like, okay, well, that's increasing your pie, right? That's a way, right? It doesn't have to be the way, but it's a way that we can talk about, that we can start to meet our goals. Okay. So that's really important, having strategic leadership conversations around your strategic gaps, making sure you have clarity in your vision, your goals. Okay. And hopping into a program like, Blueprint for Success will give you a proven framework for each of those indicators that are underperforming. If you're already a member of our school community, whether it's Inner Circle or our Leadership Gold, then you've got this access. And so if we haven't sat down with you to create a wheel and really been your thinking partner here, let's do it. Make your wheel. Let's sit and have a conversation with your team around a couple of your indicators. Let's help you prioritize. Let's help you put a framework around that, success. If you're not a part of any of our groups, come on in. If you've gained value from, us spending these 5 weeks with Lauren and I, it's 6 or 7 hours of time. I guarantee you that if you come in for a whole year, you're going to be at a whole different spot next February 21st, 2026. So please do that. So you'll get an email link where you can just go right to our webpage right now, and the link's there for our Blueprint for Success program, and you can hop in. If you're one of the first 10, we always give you that free 60-minute thinking partner call. So that means you take the assessment, we look at your wheel, and we help you break it down, prioritize, and create a plan. And it's no charge to you. So, Lauren, I always appreciate this time with you. I think you add such incredible value to our group and to the conversation because you've done it all. You've been a teacher, you've been a head of school. You haven't been a board member yet. Maybe one day we'll
No.
get you there. But you help with the PTO, right? You do a lot of so I love, right, when you're like, oh, I'm doing it at my school, and you're using some of our practices in these schools, and then we're learning from other experts, like, oh, this works, right? And it's a private school, so it works everywhere. These strategies will work if you work them, So I appreciate another book study, David. Always love having you, and I think I saw Christy come in later. So if you missed the live one, I hope this added value to you. Take that next step. If you're part of our community, reach out to Lauren. Let's get your Wheel of Success done. If you're not part of our community, reach out to Lauren. Let's get your Wheel of Success done. Let's get you in the Blueprint for Success program at a minimum and get you started for next year. So love you all, everybody. Bye-bye. Have an amazing day.